Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive.
From AI-inspired insights from farmers.
If you're enjoying what we're doing here, we'd love to hear from you too.
Absolutely.
Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and definitely leave a comment telling us what you want to see more of on this deep dive.
We're always looking for new ideas, and we really value your feedback.
So what farm-related mysteries are you dying to uncover?
Right.
What questions are keeping you up at night? Let us know, and maybe we'll tackle them in a future deep dive.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to dig into something pretty significant that's changing agriculture globally.
Yeah, we're looking at pension funds.
Exactly. Pension funds investing in farmland. Now, if you're listening and you're maybe new to farming or thinking about getting into it, this is really relevant.
Definitely. It hits right at the core issue of land access.
Right. So our mission today is to sort of unpack this trend, look at the impacts, and figure out what it really means for, family farms and people wanting to start out.
We'll be drawing on some key reports here from Grain and IP's Food.
Mm.
Their land squeeze report is particularly insightful.
Okay, so let's start with the big question. Why? Why are these funds, which you normally think of for retirement savings, suddenly looking at farmland?
Well, that's the crucial starting point, isn't it?
I
First off,
understand.
you have to grasp the sheer scale we're talking about.
Okay.
Back in 2011, Grain estimated global pension fund assets at something like US $23 trillion.
Wow. 23 trillion.
Yeah. So even if they put just a tiny percentage of that into farmland, it's a huge wave of capital hitting the sector.
So why do it? What's the appeal?
Several reasons, really. Grain points to portfolio diversification. That's a big one. Spreading risk.
Like Ascension Health and Wake Forest University, they mentioned those early on.
Exactly. They were exploring it.
Yeah.
And there's also the appeal of, real assets, tangible things like land. It feels secure as a long-term hold.
Okay, real assets. Makes sense. But is there more to it than just diversification?
Oh, absolutely. It ties into broader financial shifts. Pension funds started moving more into commodities, generally oil, metals, but also, food and the land it grows on.
And that ramped up more recently?
Yes, particularly, some argue, after the 2008 financial meltdown.
Mm-hmm.
There's analysis, again mentioned by Grain back then, suggesting commodity investors might have played a role in food price spikes.
Interesting link.
And farmland. Well, it's seen as an asset that could hold or increase its value, especially with, future food security concerns. It looks like a solid bet.
So this huge amount of money flowing in, is it happening everywhere or more in certain places?
It's definitely not evenly spread. If you look at the examples Grain compiled, both in 2011 and their 2018 update, North American and European funds are major players.
Particularly the U.S.
Yeah, U.S. funds are quite active, but it's also expanding. The 2018 report noted Japan's huge government pension investment fund got the okay to invest in alternatives like farmland.
Oh, wow.
And around the same time, Nippon Life Insurance made a pretty big overseas farmland investment.
So it's growing.
It is. And Grain raised a concern back in 2018 that this is happening sort of under the radar in places like the U.S. and Australia, with potentially big consequences for rural communities.
Right, let's get to those consequences. For someone wanting to start farming, what does all this money flooding into land actually mean for them?
This is where it really connects to the concerns raised by groups like IP's Food. When these large institutional investors come in, it tends to drive up land prices.
Makes sense. More demand.
Exactly. And the IP's Food Land Squeeze report highlights how these spiraling land prices create, a really precarious situation for farmers. It just gets harder and harder for new farmers or smaller family farms to actually buy land.
So it's a huge barrier to entry, basically.
A massive one. It's not just that big players are buying land, it's that the cost itself becomes prohibitive for others.
And IP's Food talked about a get big or get out dynamic.
Precisely. In these more corporate-dominated food systems, the pressure is immense. Rising costs, the industrial model. It pushes farmers towards needing to expand just to stay viable.
Which smaller farms often just can't do.
Right. They might lack the capital, or maybe they don't want to operate at that scale. And we see the results in North America. In Europe, average farm sizes are going up while smaller farms disappear.
There was that EU statistic.
Yeah, something like 4.6 million small farms lost between 2005 and 2020. While the number of large farms jumped significantly.
And Grain's research seemed worried about a big shift in who owns the land overall.
Yes. They estimated in 2018 that pension fund investment just in the U.S. could potentially buy up a really significant chunk of the farmland expected to come onto the market.
So a potential transfer from family farmers to financial corporations.
That's the concern, a major consolidation of land control.
Does this ownership shift also affect how the land is farmed, beyond just the price?
It certainly seems to. The focus often shifts towards commodity crops, corn, soy, things suited for large-scale industrial production.
Because that's where investors see the returns.
That's often the perception. And IPE's Food noted that many recent large land deals, these land grabs, are dominated by feed and export crops, things that can sometimes be hard on the soil over time.
Okay.
And that can create challenges for more diversified family farms, the ones maybe focusing on different crops or ecological methods or selling locally.
You mentioned land grabs. That sounds pretty serious. How do pension funds potentially connect to that?
Right. It's important to be clear what we mean by land grab. ActionAid uses the Toronto Declaration definition, which is widely accepted.
Okay, what does that involve?
It basically defines these deals as ones that violate human rights, lack proper consent, free, prior, and informed consent from the communities affected, ignore negative impacts, lack transparency, and aren't part of democratic planning.
So, really problematic deals. How do pension funds fit in?
Well, the funds themselves might not be directly doing the grabbing, you see, but their investments can provide the capital, the large sums of money, to agribusiness companies that might be involved in these kinds of deals.
Ah, so they're indirectly fueling it, potentially.
That's the argument Grain makes. ActionAid also highlights the lack of transparency and accountability that often surrounds these big land deals.
And local rights get ignored.
Frequently, customary land rights often aren't recognized, and communities aren't properly consulted or allowed to give genuine consent.
What are the human costs when this happens?
They can be devastating. ActionAid talks about forced evictions, people losing their homes and livelihoods. There can be intimidation, threats.
It's awful.
Yeah, and often compensation, if any, is totally inadequate. Sometimes there's even violence. ActionAid documented the case of Hui Mai in Cambodia.
What happened there?
She lost her land to a big sugarcane project, which was linked to trade deals that favored the corporate investors over local people. It's a stark example.
And this idea of land being idle.
Right. Land is often labeled idle or underused by investors or governments to justify taking it over. But that land is often vital for local communities, for grazing, for gathering resources for small plots, especially for women, pastoralists, people practicing shifting cultivation.
So these land grabs and the push for large-scale farming, they have ripple effects beyond just who owns the plot of land.
Absolutely. The economic and community consequences are broad. Environmentally, you often see more large-scale monoculture.
Which isn't always great for the environment.
No. It can lead to deforestation, loss of biodiversity, soil degradation, water contamination. There was a case study in Ecuador that highlighted impacts like these.
And socially, for the communities themselves.
Well, impacts on farmers' health, sometimes related to stress or exposure to chemicals used in industrial farming, and just the fundamental change to the agricultural landscape people are used to.
Are some people affected more than others?
Yes, rural women are often particularly vulnerable. Land grabs can mean they lose access to land and resources they traditionally relied on, undermining their role in food production.
Is there data on that?
The FAO, the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, estimated that if women had the same access to resources as men, agricultural yields could increase significantly, and world hunger could be reduced substantially.
Wow. So empowering women farmers is key.
Absolutely. And beyond that, these large-scale operations can disrupt the local food systems and markets that small-scale farmers depend on. It pushes them further to the margins.
And IP's Food also mentioned economic precarity.
Yeah, that even for farmers within these corporate systems, it can be precarious. High input costs, volatile prices for commodities, boom-bust cycles can lead to farmers losing their land anyway through debt.
This does paint a pretty worrying picture. But are people just accepting this? Or is there pushback? Are there ways to fight back?
Oh, there's definitely resistance and efforts to counteract this. It's not a done deal. Remember that example with CLSTRS?
California Teachers Retirement System?
Right. A coalition campaigned against their initial big planned investment in commodities. And it worked to an extent. They ended up reducing the amount and making it temporary. It shows public pressure can matter.
So collective action helps. What else? ActionAid had specific steps.
Yes, they laid out 4 key things governments should do to prevent land grabs. Really important policy recommendations.
Okay, what are they?
First, governments need to review and actually replace policies that fuel these grabs. Instead, they need policies that prioritize sustainable land use and support small-scale producers.
Like suspending big land deals and making things more transparent.
Exactly. Suspend and review large concessions, demand transparency. Second, fully implement the international tenure guidelines, the ones covering land, fisheries, forests.
What does that mean practically?
It means recognizing and respecting all legitimate rights to land, including customary rights often held by communities, and critically, ensuring free, prior, and informed consent, FPIC, for any project affecting them.
Got it. FPIC. What's the third step?
Ensure access to justice. People affected by land grabs need effective ways to seek remedies, to challenge these deals, to get compensation.
Makes sense. And the fourth?
Regulate businesses. Make companies accountable for respecting human rights and for meeting environmental, social, and labor standards in their operations and supply chains.
Those are big policy changes. Are there things happening more at the community level too?
Yes, absolutely. IP is Food highlights examples of communities organizing, using things like participatory mapping to document their traditional land use and knowledge to protect their rights.
Like the Bagungu people in Uganda.
That's the example they use, yeah. And there are community-led conservation projects, renewable energy initiatives that put agroecology and small producers at the center.
Like that solar plant in India.
The Rampura Community Solar Power Plant, yes. These offer alternative models. And then there's the call for stronger antitrust laws.
To curb the power of big agribusiness.
Right, to limit their ability to dominate markets, including land markets. And finally, looking at actual land reform, like efforts in South Korea or Colombia, focused on redistribution and supporting small farms.
So there are pathways forward, both top-down policy changes and bottom-up community action.
Definitely. It requires action on multiple fronts.
This has been incredibly insightful, unpacking a really complex issue. Now, thinking about everything we've discussed, the community action, the policy side, what's one exclusive bonus insight you could offer listeners, especially those new or aspiring farmers?
That's a great question. Building on all that, I think a really powerful insight for new farmers is realizing the strength in collective action and, crucially, engaging directly with your local policymaker.
Okay, so getting involved locally.
Yes. Don't underestimate it. Connect with other small farmers in your area. Find community groups, organizations working on sustainable ag or land rights. There's often strength in numbers.
And the policymaker piece.
Do a bit of homework. Understand your local government who makes decisions about land use, zoning, agricultural support. Identify those people.
But they just show up.
Well, yeah, but also share your story. Tell them directly about the challenges you face trying to access land. Your personal experience makes the impact of these big financial trends real. It's not just abstract numbers anymore.
So make it personal.
Exactly. Go to local meetings, maybe join an agricultural board if you can, or even think about forming a farmer cooperative. It amplifies your voice. You can advocate together for local policies that actually support fair land access and help family farms thrive.
And those action aid recommendations could be useful there.
Absolutely. Understanding the types of policies that help, like transparency, recognizing different tenure rights, supporting smallholders, gives you concrete things to ask for at the local level, too. It's about building power collectively and engaging strategically.
That's incredibly practical advice. Thank you. So to wrap up, it's really clear that understanding these big financial forces shaping agriculture is, well, essential for anyone farming or thinking about it.
It really is. The money flows have real consequences.
We've seen how pension funds are playing a bigger role, how that can push up land prices, potentially squeeze out smaller farms, and tilt the balance towards large-scale commodity farming.
But also how awareness, collective action, and smart policy advocacy offer ways to push back and shape a different future.
Right. So the final thought for you listening is, what role can you play? If you're a new or aspiring farmer, how can you engage with these issues in your own community? How can you advocate for a more equitable, sustainable agricultural future, even in the face of these global trends?
It's a question worth pondering. And definitely check out those reports from Grain, IP's Food, and ActionAid if you want to dive deeper.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We hope this exploration has been valuable. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.
Hitting that like button and smash that subscribe.